That man is a little weird. I thought so the first time I saw him in Central Park. At that time, he was standing in front of a coffee shop to buy something. He was tall and straight, and the suit he wore was a little old-fashioned. But the strangest thing was that he took out a card when paying the bill. The clerks were surprised to see this card. It took them a while to find the card-swiping page in the terminal, and the page displayed on the particle screen looked rough. The man bought a cup of coffee and walked towards the bench. The two clerks began to laugh and gossip.
There's still people who swipe cards nowadays.
Yeah, I remember the last time I saw that kind of card was 5 years ago. Does this man come from the past?
I glanced at the bench and saw the man sit there and take a sip of coffee. He sat very straight and looked around, seemingly at a loss. That man is a little weird, I thought. Then suddenly, I felt someone pulling at my clothes. I looked back to find a little girl looking up at me, pointing to the balloons in my hand.
Which one do you want? How about the pink one?
I twisted a long balloon into the shape of a puppy and gave it to her. I squat down to allow her to touch my red nose in rainbow curls. She held the dog-shaped balloon and touched my face, which was applied with white pigments. The child terminal on her wrist was sparkling. In fact, the clerk said nothing wrong. Even such a little child had her own terminal in this era, and who would swipe a card? Thinking of this, I couldn't help looking at the man again and found that he took out something even more shocking. A phone! And a pocket watch! Weren't these used by seniors? Out of curiosity, I glanced at the man from time to time, and he just sat there all day long, seeming as though he was allowing me to look at him thoroughly. Didn't he have to work? What was he watching? Why was he always frowning? He looked very unhappy. I handed the last balloon to an old lady, blessed her, and pulled a party popper. She smiled, and I suddenly thought I should give a balloon to that man. After all, making people happy is a clown's duty. After preparing everything for today, I left the van and walked to the center of the park with a few cartons in my hands. It was still early, but there were already many children playing in the park. I lifted the cartons higher and concentrated on the road ahead to avoid hitting them. However, Murphy's Law took effect. A boy rushed from my right side and ran into me. It wasn't easy to keep my balance in these big clown shoes. Although I managed to keep my feet, the cartons in my hand started shaking hard. Just then, a hand came across my head to help me hold the box. I looked up and found it was the strange man. Ah, thank you.
You're welcome.
It was the first time that I heard him speak. His voice was deep and imposing, which matched his looks well. The man was handsome, but he always frowned slightly, which made him look difficult to approach. He sat down in the old place, watching his phone and pocket watch silently with a cold face. I twisted a dark purple balloon into a puppy, took it to the bench, and said to the man with a smile,
"This is for you."
He looked up at me and shook his head.
Thank you, but I don't need it.
The direct refusal made me a little embarrassed. I withdrew my hand and held the balloon dog in my arms without knowing what to say.
Is there anything else?
Seeing I didn't intend to go, he asked me to leave, and the purple eyes looking at me were as cold as ice. I didn't know what this man had experienced, nor did I know where he came from. But there was a voice in my heart telling me I couldn't leave him like this. I sat down on the other end of the bench and asked,
"Why don't you use the terminal?"
He didn't reply, so I could only play as the purple balloon dog and said to myself,
"If you don't have money, you can go to the information center to get the basic terminal for free. And all you need to do is show your citizen ID.
The man hesitated and seemed at a loss for a moment. But soon he resumed his poker face and rejected my offer.
I won't need it.
Judging from his expression, I felt that he had never heard of the terminal. However, since the Citizen ID system was implemented 5 years ago, everyone would know about it. In order to facilitate information collection, everyone's first terminal was issued by the Information Center. So, did he even have an ID number? Or was he a criminal? This might explain why he didn't have a terminal or couldn't buy one. A lot of scenes in crime movies appeared in my mind, and I couldn't help but laugh at my thoughts. Anyway, I secretly looked at the man beside me. Some lonely silhouette in my memory gradually overlapped the man sitting on the bench. He glanced at me suddenly, and I quickly gave him an embarrassed smile. Anyway, he didn't look like a bad guy who just got out of prison. I'd rather believe he was a time traveler. The functions of the terminal will be limited with no ID, but it's still better than nothing. I found this. Just take it. I took out an old terminal and sat down next to the man before he could refuse. Then I turned on the terminal and began teaching him. He seemed reluctant at first, but soon he began watching the particle screen in front of him and nodded from time to time. The terminal didn't have many basic functions, and he learned them very quickly. Soon he had mastered all of them. I handed the terminal to him with a smile. Although it is very old, please cherish it. He took it and nodded slightly.
How much is it? I will pay you.
I got it for free, and it is so shabby now. How can I still ask for money from you? He frowned again after hearing this. Both of us didn't know what to say, and when I was ready to say something to break the awkward silence, I heard him say, "Thank you."
You're welcome.
Although I could feel the sincerity of this gratitude, his expression was so unnatural that I could nearly see the words, "I don't want to benefit without any reason," on his face. Alas, forget it. It doesn't matter that I tell him. Actually, you remind me of someone. The man heard me and looked over. He always looked very seriously at people. His eyes were so sharp that he seemed able to see through anyone at a glance. That man is my elder brother. However, he died in the flu breakout 10 years ago. My voice was getting lower and lower, and I thought of that moment 10 years ago. At that time, I was just a 12-year-old boy. I managed to climb to the window of the ward and saw the lonely back of my brother who was sitting on the sickbed. I hammered the glass and shouted at him. Even the nurse noticed me, but he never looked back.
Sorry.
I was still immersed in the memory when I suddenly heard him. I waved to him, telling him not to worry about me. Anyway, what is gone is already gone, and I need to look forward.
The flu breakout, you said?
Don't you know it? I was a little surprised and entered the keywords on my terminal. The flu suddenly broke out 10 years ago and many people died. Even more strangely, all the patients suddenly recovered one day. How could he know nothing about it? Although 10 years had passed and it is rarely mentioned now, no one could forget such a big incident. I was a bit confused, but when I thought about all these mysteries surrounding this man, I suddenly didn't feel the need to ask. After showing him some news, I turned off the terminal. As I was about to talk to him, I saw that he had opened the old terminal and entered the search page skillfully. Well, a very quick learner indeed. He remained silent, and I didn't know what to say. Watching the screen, I finally realized that he was looking for someone. He entered a name and set the filter. However, the search result was 0. Are you sure about this name? I turned back to see a look that made me speechless. With shock and doubt mixed, his eyes suddenly turned into boundless darkness, and the last light was lost. The next day, he didn't come to the park again. I didn't know where he went. Staring at the empty bench, I guessed he might have something important to do. I hope he could be luckier than me. It was getting late. I stretched out after finally giving the last balloon out and prepared to take off the clown costume back in the van.
Wait a minute.
Was there someone calling me? The voice was quite familiar. I looked back curiously to find it was just that man. It's you! Where have you been? Is everything going well? I stepped forward and greeted him with a smile, but I was surprised to find he seemed exhausted. Only one day had passed, but he looked so tired that he seemed to have experienced centuries. Under the streetlight, his dark eyes flashed with the vicissitudes of life that didn't fit his age. Seeing him like this, I dare not ask anymore. With a soft cough, I switched to an easy topic. Would you like some water? I will get some for you in the van.
No thanks.
Well, how about coffee? It's my treat. I pointed to the coffee shop not far away, which would close after a while. I'm going back to change clothes. Wait a minute.
Don't go to the van.
What? I looked at the van which was parked nearby. The light of the street lamp formed an orange circle surrounding it. Then 2 passers-by walked by it. On such a quiet summer night, even the chirping of the cicada was gentle. Why not?
I can't explain too much, but I hope you can listen to me.
In the past few days I spent with him, he always looked cold and unapproachable. I couldn't even feel any warmth in his thanks and sorry. However, I felt different emotions from him this time. What shocking secret lay behind this hope? Was this related to the tiredness in his eyes? Since he didn't want to say it, I let him be. I see. I had just finished talking when we heard the police siren at the corner of the street. Several police cars stopped near my van, and a group of policemen came to us. They said someone reported 10 minutes ago that terrorists had planted bombs nearby. Terrorists? Bombs? Wondering what was going on, I unconsciously looked at the man next to me. He seemed not to notice my gaze, and silently led the police to the van. 5 minutes later, the police blocked the scene and found a bomb in the van. What's going on? The red and blue police light shone on the man's cold face. He seemed to be looking at the busy crowd as well as a far future. I swallowed my fears and doubts and just followed his gaze. I found that man near a tree on the Central Lake bank. It looked like just an ordinary tree, but he stared at the trunk for a long time, and in a rare moment, his brows were no longer furrowed. I approached him and looked at the tree casually. Surprisingly, I found some words carved on it. May everyone be safe and sound. Ahem. I wanted to call to him, but I suddenly remembered I didn't even know his name. Fortunately, he noticed me this time, and I quickly reached out and handed him a purple balloon dog. This is for you. I didn't know if he could see that this was the one that he refused that day.
Thank you.
He hesitated, but finally took the balloon dog and returned that old terminal to me, much to my surprise. An idea I came up with last night began to take root. Feeling the balloon dog leaving my palm and the cold surface of the terminal, I smiled and said to him the blessing I've repeated countless times.
May you smile often and be happy.
Crack. I pulled a party popper, and colorful ribbons scattered, looking like the end of a drama or a grand coronation. He walked away, leaving me looking down at the old terminal in my hand. With a tap on the switch, the recent search records automatically appeared. Film company. Evol. Evol? What's that? Out of curiosity, I entered the same keyword, but found nothing. As for that film company, It seemed to have vanished from the terminal a few years ago. I somehow remember the man's look just now. He was looking at the words on the tree, smiling, but his brows furrowed as if he was about to cry. In an instant, he looked determined again. Looking at the figure fading away, I suddenly realized the lonely silhouette of my brother in my deep memory had nothing in common with this man. Fallen, helpless, desperate, none of these words could be used to describe him. As long as he had hope, he could realize the impossible and create the brightest future.